Hello, everyone. A very good morning and welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. So, before we begin the discussion, can you please let me know if I'm clearly audible and visible? Please type in the comments, type yes if I'm clearly audible and visible so that we can get started with today's discussion. So, please let me know if the audio video is fine. Great. Everything looks good. So, welcome to the daily Hindu news analysis. Let's begin today's discussion by first looking at the topics that we are going to discuss. See, I've always been telling the students that Sunday newspaper is extremely important. Many students end up ignoring the Sunday newspaper, thinking that there are no important articles. But let me tell you why the Sunday newspaper is very important. Just look at the number of articles I have chosen today for discussion. Sundays, especially, the Hindu brings out many interesting small snippets and small articles which are very, very important for your prelims exam. So, today we have a total of 12 articles to discuss. There are two big articles that require a detailed, comprehensive analysis, and 10 small articles that has to be covered from a prelims perspective. So let's cover all these topics in complete detail so that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper again. If you guys are benefiting from our initiative, do support us with your likes, your comments, share this video with other aspirants, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Now let's get started, but before that, I have a very important announcement. Today, Unacademy is conducting India's biggest civil services championship test. This is an opportunity for you to attempt full length question papers of GS and CSAT at 11 a.m. and 5 p.m. And you stand a chance to win up to 100% scholarship on our IAS courses, along with many attractive rewards. You stand a chance to win IPL box tickets and as well as several attractive gadgets. So those interested, register immediately because the test begins at 11 a.m. as soon as the session ends here. So the link for the same is provided in the video description below. And also ensure that you join my Telegram channel by scanning the QR code on your screen because after the session ends, I'll be sharing this detailed PDF with the annotations on my Telegram channel. With this, let's begin today's discussion of the Hindu and let's look at the first article. On page number 12, the Hindu carries an important column related to Genome India project. So today we will understand what is Genome India project, why is it in news, what is the significance of this project, what are the objectives of Genome India project. This topic can be very important for prelims and as well as for your mains exam. In fact, even yesterday, one of the major articles we discussed was related to genome and genetic engineering. Today as well, it's in the same domain. So let's talk about Genome India. What is this project which was launched in 2020? This ambitious initiative was launched by the Modi government in January 2020 with dedicated funding being provided by the Ministry of Science and Technology. The Department of Biotech, the Department of Biotechnology under the Ministry of Science and Tech has funded this ambitious initiative to collect genome samples of 10,000 individuals in phase 1 and another 10,000 individuals in phase 2. So, a total of 20,000 samples, genome or genetic samples, would be collected and they would be sequenced. At least 10,000 out of these 20,000 samples have been fully sequenced. So, this genome sequencing serves a major purpose. It helps in understanding the genetic diversity of our population. It helps in understanding the various mutations, the genetic mutations which can be seen in different population groups. Since India is a very diverse country, we have different groups of people, few tribal groups, non-tribal groups. And also please understand, there is a direct link between language and ethnic groups. One's ethnicity is often associated with language. That's why researchers consider language to be a proxy for genetic and ethnic identity as well. Usually, certain tribal and non tribal groups which speak a distinct language They often belong to a certain ethnicity, which is a result of their genetics. And I'm sure you know that many communities, especially in India and in many other civilizations as well, they happen to be endogamous, meaning they marry within the clan or within the tribe or within the caste or community. That is what we call as inbreeding. So this would have preserved the genetic purity, the so called genetic purity within these distinct groups. So that's why when you move across India from one geographical region to another, you find that the facial features and the characteristics of people they change. The height, the weight of people, the way they look, the complexion, the quality of their hair, or even the diseases they suffer from. It differs from genetic group to genetic group, from one ethno-linguistic group to another ethno-linguistic group. Few tribal groups have a different genetic set of mutations, which may not be seen in other groups. This could be advantageous in some cases, right? Where some groups are blessed with a more athletic build and better health indicators. But some of the mutations can even be a huge disadvantage because it could make certain groups prone to certain diseases, especially genetic hereditary diseases. I'm sure you would have heard about sickle cell anemia, how the sickle cell disease is more prevalent amongst few tribal groups in the country. Few specific tribes have a greater inclination, a greater proclivity to suffer from sickle cell anemia, which is essentially inherited because of the genetic mutations they have. So, given this profile, it's very important to understand the genetic distribution and the diversity in the country, that too from a policy making perspective, from a healthcare point of view. So, that is the purpose behind Genome India project. In fact, at the global level, there is a similar project called the Human Genome Project. But the Global Human Genome Project has largely been Eurocentric, where the samples that have been collected have largely focused on Western countries and other cultures and societies, with very little focus on the diversity of India. So, India launched its own genome initiative to collect genome samples to study the genetic sequence and develop the full genome sequence so that we can understand the population profile of the country, understand the ethno linguistic diversity, and develop scientific knowledge about the genetic mutations in different population groups so that we can understand their vulnerability for diseases. This helps in understanding the proclivity of certain groups for certain diseases so that you can develop better diagnostic tools. You can develop what we call as precision medicine. Targeted medical tools and tests and devices can be developed. Better drugs, better vaccines can be developed. And preventive steps can also be taken to prevent certain hereditary genetic diseases. So, from a healthcare perspective and a policy making perspective, this scientific study holds immense significance for a large country like India. So, under this project, around 20 scientific institutions they pooled their resources and efforts together to carry out the genome sequencing of 20,000 individuals in the country. Samples from 20,000 individuals have been collected, and out of that, full genome sequencing has been done for 10,000 samples collected from 10,000 individuals. Institutions such as the Center for Brain Research, which is based out of Indian Institute of Science in Bengaluru, led this scientific project along with many other institutions from the country, including the Center for Cellular Microbiology in Hyderabad and many other scientific institutions. So 20 and more than 20 institutions have been part of this collaborative project, and they have collected the samples from 83 diverse population groups. Out of these 83 groups, around 30 of them were tribal groups. The remaining 50 have been non-tribal groups. The samples collected includes not just the blood sample to carry out the full genome sequencing, but also phenotype data, which includes the height and weight of the individual, and as well as the hip and waist circumference to understand the build of the body type, and as well as blood pressure. These key phenotype data also was captured along with blood samples from nearly 20,000 individuals. In phase 1, the full genome sequencing of 10,000 individuals has been completed, and the final reports have been published. So that is the context in which this article has been brought up. So now let's understand from what type of groups the samples were collected, and let's understand the scientific approach towards genome sequencing and what could be the advantages, the benefits of this study. In this particular project, the researchers, as I said, have collected the samples from 83 population groups which are unrelated to each other. In fact, almost every individual sample which has been collected under this study is not related to another sample which has been collected. This ensures the diversity of the sample itself. They have chosen the groups from 100 distinct geographical regions of the country, from northeast India to southern parts of India to the islands, Andaman, Nicobar, and Lakshadweep as well. So, through very careful selection, 83 population groups were identified, and out of them, as I said, around 30 of them were tribal groups belonging to different races, including the Tibeto-Burman lineage, which you primarily find towards the Himalayan belt and the northeastern region. The Indo-European lineage, essentially found towards northern parts of India. The Dravidian lineage, primarily found towards southern part of India. And the Austro-Asiatic lineage, which you find in Andaman, Nicobar, and few other parts of the country. So like this, a distinct mix of samples were collected, not only from such tribal groups, but from non-tribal entities as well. And focus was also placed on distinct ethno-linguistic groups. As I told you, language is often associated with a distinct ethnicity. Now, take for example the Bodo community in Assam. They belong to a distinct ethnic lineage under the Tibeto-Burman class, and they speak a distinct language, which is the Bodo language. Same goes for the Mizo community. The Mizo ethnic community speaks a different language, the Mizo language. So, quite often, language has been a proxy for ethnicity, which essentially is an indicator of genetic distinction as well. So, based on such parameters, these samples were collected from around the country, and 10,000 of these samples have been fully sequenced. And now, this data is going to be extremely crucial for policy making and for studies in the field of biotechnology. As I said, many groups in the country would be endogamous as a part of their cultural practice, meaning they would marry within the community, within the clan, within the tribe, thus preserving the distinct genetic traits. So, this factor also has been accounted for in the study. And now, the final results which have been published is going to help the researchers. The government is also looking to scale up this project further under a phase 2 of the program, where the remaining 10,000 samples also would be fully sequenced, and all the data is being archived at a biological data center. This data, this genomic data, would be made available to pharmaceutical companies, medical research organizations, scientific institutions, so that they can understand the genetic mutations that are found within our population. It helps us gain an insight into the millions of mutations which might be seen, and accordingly, we can identify the markers of various diseases. The genetic markers can be flagged, and this will help in developing precision medicine. See, the Global Human Genome Project, the problem with that was it was largely Eurocentric. Even though samples were collected from around the world, it would not do justice to the genetic diversity of India and the population diversity of India. So we needed a national level project for that. Now, since the data was missing before the GenomeIndia project, if you look at the available drugs, vaccines, diagnostic tools, and the general medical research which is available, it was largely based on Western studies, Western trials. You take a Western pharmaceutical company based out of US or Europe, they would have developed a drug or a vaccine based on the genetic markers and the disease profile of their population. So that may not be perfectly suited for Indian conditions, for Indian genetics. So that is why it is important to understand the genetic markers within our population so that we can develop better drugs, better diagnostic tools, better vaccines, which can be more effective. We can bring in policy measures to prevent certain diseases which get inherited from generation to generation. So genetic hereditary diseases can be better tackled. That is why a study like this is extremely important, not just from a healthcare perspective, but also from a policy making perspective. So I hope all of you have understood this key topic. So based on this, take up this practice question for your mains answer writing practice. Based on what we have discussed, try to write an answer and post your answers in the comment section. Now let's move on to the next article. On page 13 and 14, we have two related articles connected to Iran's controversial nuclear weapons program. The Hindu carries a very detailed article in today's paper, which actually helps us understand in detail the entire background of Iran's nuclear weapons program and the ongoing tensions between US and Iran and Israel. First, let me tell you the context in which the topic is in news, and then we can break down this topic. In fact, I'll be going beyond the article and I'll give you a comprehensive understanding of this topic today. See, currently, the Trump administration in the US has issued a final warning for Iran. US has warned Iran to negotiate a new nuclear deal to put an end to Iran's nuclear enrichment and its weapons program. If these talks fail, Donald Trump has threatened military action against Iran. In fact, as we speak, US and Iran have started the nuclear talks in a third neutral country in Oman. Just yesterday, the US Special Envoy for West Asia, Steve Witkoff, who, who is very close to President Donald Trump, has met with Iranian Foreign Minister in Muscat. Oman has offered itself as a neutral location for these nuclear talks between US and Iran. And currently, Iran has shown the willingness to talk, to reduce the tensions and work out a nuclear deal which could possibly end the nuclear tensions between these two countries. But if the talks fail, it could have serious ramifications for the region and the world. Because US has threatened military action against Iran, and Israel, which is the arch enemy of Iran, has been calling for military action against Iran, and Israel has even sworn to attack Iran's nuclear facilities if required. Because if Iran were to possess a nuclear weapon in the coming months or in the coming years, that would pose an existential threat to Israel, given their rivalry and enmity. Iran has called for death to Israel, death to America. So Iran's nuclear weapons program is primarily aimed at its arch enemies, Israel and United States. Israel is already waiting to exploit the weakness of Iran, and it's even said that it won't hesitate to target Iran's nuclear facilities if necessary. US has joined this hostility, and Trump has threatened military action if the talks fail. So that is why the ongoing talks, the nuclear talks in Muscat in Oman between US and Iran is extremely important. It is being closely watched by all the countries, including India. In fact, we have an article related to that as well on page number 14. So it's in this context that we need to understand Iran's nuclear program, why Iran started pursuing nuclear weapons. What's the background here? We should also understand certain technologies. There are certain scientific aspects related to Iran's nuclear weapons program, which can be very important for prelims and mains. We'll understand the geopolitical dimensions. And then finally, we'll discuss about the Iran nuclear deal. Now, the question is, why did Iran start pursuing nuclear weapons? See, from 1950s to 1979, during the Cold War period, Iran was actually a very close ally of United States. I know it's hard to believe. Today they are arch enemies, but at one point, Iran and US were very close friends. As they say in international relations, in geopolitics, there are no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, only permanent interests. So at one point, Iran US were close friends, close allies during the Cold War period. How was this possible? It was possible because the United States had installed a pro-Western leader through a regime change operation led by the CIA of the United States. The US had interfered in Iran's politics, and in 1951-52, US had installed the Shah of the Pahlavi dynasty as the leader of the country. The Shah of Iran came to power essentially with American backing, with the support of the CIA. So, this was direct American political interference in Iran during the Cold War period to protect American and Western influence against Soviet influence. So, since the Shah of Iran was basically a puppet of the US, controlled by the CIA, Iran and US had very good relations. In fact, Iran was even more modern, more progressive, and it had imbibed Western civilizational cultural values as well. It was a very progressive, open society, unlike what it is today. But the growing unpopularity of the Shah of Iran led the radical Shia clerics to rebel against the Shah, and they managed to exploit the negative sentiment amongst the masses, and they triggered a massive revolution against the regime of the Shah of Iran. This is what we call as the 1979 Iranian Revolution, a mass people-led revolution which was hijacked by radical Shia clerics under the Ayatollah. Eventually, the Shah of Iran was kicked out. The Iranian regime, the pro-US regime, collapsed, and radical Shia clerics took over the country, and that is how the supreme Shia leader, Ayatollah al-Khamenei, became the supreme leader of Iran. So since then, Iran has declared death to Israel, death to America. Iran has always backed the Palestinian cause and doesn't recognize the existence of Israel. In support of the Palestinian liberation movement, Iran would support extremist groups such as Hamas, Hezbollah, and many others to target Israel. And Iran has even tried to counter Israel directly. So, this makes Iran and Israel arch enemies of each other, and Israel is no less. Israel has repeatedly targeted and undermined Iran over the last 40 to 50 years. Both the countries are involved in both overt and covert wars targeting each other. So Iran naturally became an enemy of the US. So since Iran faced these existential threats from Israel and US, it decided to pursue a nuclear program. See, when the Shah was in power before 1979, Iran had signed the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Iran is a signatory to the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. I hope you know what are the terms of the NPT. If you're a signatory to NPT, basically you're committing that you will never pursue nuclear weapons. Because under non-proliferation treaty, only the 5 permanent members of UNSC, the P5, are officially recognized as nuclear weapon states. That is US, China, UK and France and Russia. Only these 5 countries are officially recognized as nuclear weapon states. Only they can retain their nuclear arsenal. Every other country which is going to sign NPT, they have to commit that they will never pursue nuclear weapons. That is what non-proliferation treaty says. That is why India, along with even Pakistan and later Israel, they have rejected the NPT. India said we will never sign NPT because India needed the right, the opportunity to develop nuclear weapons to counter China. Because by 1960s, China had already possessed nuclear weapons, which was a direct threat for India. Given the standing border dispute and the war we had fought, it was a strategic necessity for India to have the option to develop nuclear weapons. So India rejected the NPT. So did Pakistan, so did Israel to retain their right to develop nuclear weapons. But Iran was a signatory. It had signed NPT because until 1979, Iran was pro-Western. It was aligned with the US. But after the Iranian Revolution, after it came under radical Shia conservative leaders, Iran rejected the NPT. As in, it still remains a signatory for official purposes. But Iran essentially violated the terms of the NPT. Though it has never quit NPT, it has not exited the Non-Proliferation Treaty. It remains a signatory on paper. It started breaking the terms by seeking to pursue nuclear weapons. And this has been established as well through the inspections of IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. The IAEA is vested with the responsibility to enforce the Non-Proliferation Treaty, to ensure that there is no nuclear proliferation, and to inspect nuclear facilities around the world. So from 1980s onwards, Iran started its pursuit of nuclear weapons and accelerated this program by 1990s and early 2000. So as Iran came a step closer to nuclear weapons, it has been constantly threatened and targeted by its rivals, by Israel, by United States, and even by the Sunni power bloc led by Saudi Arabia. Because don't forget the sectarian regional rivalry present in West Asia. Iran is a Shia power, a leader of the Shia power bloc. So if Iran were to build nuclear weapons, it would obviously be a threat to the Sunni power bloc, to the Sunni countries such as Saudi Arabia, UAE, and the others. So they all formed an axis against Iran. The Sunni powers led by Saudi Arabia, along with Israel and United States, they all aligned together to jointly target and oppose Iran, and Iran has built its own axis, including Syria and extremist groups like Hamas, Hezbollah, now the Houthis, to target the rivals. So this has been the ongoing conflict in West Asia. Now, as Iran got closer to nuclear weapons technology, as it managed to enhance its nuclear enrichment and build nuclear centrifuges for enriching uranium, it has been repeatedly targeted by Israel, US, and other rivals. I can give you some examples as well. For example, there have been instances where Israel has conducted airstrikes and targeted military operations aimed at dismantling Iran's nuclear program. Israel's Secret Service, its intelligence agency Mossad, has been accused of conducting targeted assassinations of top Iranian nuclear scientists with the help of the CIA of the United States. So Israel and US have carried out targeted assassinations of top Iranian generals, Iranian nuclear scientists. They even waged a cyber war a few years ago by using a computer malware, a computer worm known as Stuxnet. Stuxnet managed to infiltrate the critical computers which controlled Iranian nuclear centrifuges. It's alleged that Stuxnet was jointly developed by the cybersecurity agencies of Israel and US as a cyber weapon, an offensive cyber weapon. And they managed to spin the centrifuges out of control and physically destroyed few centrifuges as well through the Stuxnet computer worm. This marked one of the biggest known cyber war incidents in the world. So there have been many such overt covert methods. In fact, US would target Iran by imposing economic sanctions to bring overt pressure and to exert diplomatic pressure on Iran. While Israel conducted few overt military strikes and covert assassinations and covert cyber war with American help, US directly targeted Iran with economic sanctions to cripple its economy. Sanctions were placed on Iran's oil exports, on its defense industry, which were the key sources of revenue. So this has been the standoff between US and Iran and Israel and Iran. Now, before we talk about the geopolitics, let's understand the science behind nuclear enrichment and why centrifuges are needed. This topic could also be very important. See, when you take uranium, that is naturally occurring uranium, did you know that only 0.7% of naturally occurring uranium is made up of uranium 235? Now, uranium 235 is the uranium isotope which is needed to sustain a nuclear fission chain reaction, which is essential for building a nuclear bomb. Rest of the uranium is made up of uranium 238, which is not fissile. So naturally occurring uranium has to be enriched. The concentration of uranium 235 has to be increased in order to initiate and sustain a nuclear fission chain reaction. There are different levels of enrichment, which is carried out by using centrifuges, nuclear centrifuges. Now think of these centrifuges like a washing machine, for example. It employs centrifugal force to separate uranium 235 and 238 and enhance the concentration of uranium 235. So these centrifuges are arranged in a cascade. They are arranged one after the other. And uranium hexafluoride gas, UF6, it is initially in gaseous form. It is passed from one centrifuge to another. These centrifuges are spinning at a very fast rate. They'll be carrying out thousands of rotations per minute. Since uranium 238 is more dense compared to uranium 235, uranium 238, because of centrifugal force which is acting upon it, it will be pushed to the periphery of the centrifuge, which can be easily filtered out. Uranium 235, which is lighter, will concentrate in the middle, and this will be taken as the feed for the next centrifuge. So it's like a cascade of centrifuges which are set up at a centrifuge plant where the concentration level increases from one stage to another. In each stage, uranium 238 is separated because of its higher density. Centrifugal force will push it out to the periphery, and the enriched uranium now is taken to the next centrifuge. Like this, the cascade continues until you have enriched uranium. Now, there are different types of enriched uranium which serve different purposes. We have low enriched uranium, usually uranium which is enriched up to 3.5%, meaning out of the uranium, 3.5% of it would be uranium 235. Such low enriched uranium actually has many applications, civilian applications. This can be used for various medical purposes. For example, to treat cancer, radiation therapy is a known therapeutic measure, and also in various scanners, right? So such low enriched uranium can be employed. There are many industrial applications as well. So low enriched uranium is enriched uranium between 3.5% to 20%. Anything above 20% falls under the category of highly enriched uranium. 20% and above, if enrichment is above 20%, that is what we call as highly enriched uranium. This is enough to build civilian power reactors, nuclear power reactors, to sustain a fission reaction to generate electricity. But it is not enough to build a nuclear bomb. To build a nuclear warhead, you need something known as weapons grade uranium, which is basically 90% and above enriched uranium. So please remember this. Weapons grade uranium is essentially enriched up to 90% and beyond. So to build a nuclear warhead, you need such highly enriched uranium, which are processed through these centrifuges, cascade after cascade, step after step. Now, Iran, day by day, was getting closer to this level. In early 2000 itself, the IAEA estimated that Iran is getting closer to highly enriched uranium. And by 2005, 2006, it had managed to procure few kilograms of highly enriched uranium. Because see, to generate just 1 kilogram of highly enriched uranium, you need several kilograms of natural uranium or yellow cake. Because of the low concentration of uranium 235, you need a very large resource pool to generate even 1 kilogram of uranium 235, which is highly enriched to about 80% or 90%. Now, please look at the map here. By 1990s, Iran had built multiple nuclear facilities with two major centrifuge facilities located at Natanz and Fordo. Please mark these locations. That's why I'm giving the map as well. There can be map-based questions in your prelims. This map is showing you the nuclear facilities of Iran, and especially Natanz and Fordo are very important because this is where the nuclear centrifuge facilities of Iran are located. Through these centrifuge facilities, Iran managed to enrich its uranium, and it even managed to generate highly enriched uranium by 2009-2010. IAEA estimates showed that by 2006, Iran already had few kilograms of highly enriched uranium, and by 2010, it had sufficient quantity to build a few nuclear bombs. That is when tensions rose between US and Iran, and US under then President Obama levied crippling economic sanctions targeting Iran. US even threatened war against Iran, and tensions had increased between them. It appeared as if US and Iran might get involved in a direct war. So then the global powers intervened, especially the European powers, which didn't want the conflict to break out. They intervened along with Russia and China. The five permanent members of UNSC got together with European Union, and they negotiated with Iran, and this led to a historic nuclear deal. The 2015 Iran nuclear deal, which is officially known as JCPOA, the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action was negotiated between Iran and P5 plus 1 countries. P5 refers to 5 permanent members of UN Security Council: UK, France, Russia, China, and US. The plus 1 here refers to Germany along with European Union. So these countries negotiated the nuclear deal, and as per the deal, US promised to lift the economic sanctions if Iran ended its enrichment. Specific conditions were laid out under the nuclear deal as well. Iran was not supposed to hold more than 300 kilograms of low enriched uranium in stockpile. That was the cap which was placed. Iran was supposed to limit enrichment to just 3.67%, which could be used only for medical purposes and other industrial applications. And Iran was supposed to hand over any highly enriched uranium to European countries, which in turn would provide civilian nuclear technology to Iran. Iran agreed to all these commitments, and in return, the US lifted the economic sanctions. So, this had brought some peace and stability into the relationship and in the region. Now, why are we discussing all this in such detail? It is important because India was directly affected by all these developments. See, obviously, if Iran were to become a nuclear power, possessing nuclear weapons, it will change the balance of power in the region. Don't forget, India, Pakistan, China, in the same neighborhood, possess nuclear weapons as well. Iran shares borders with Pakistan, and any other country developing nuclear weapons in this region will alter the balance of power. So, India doesn't want that to happen, obviously. So, Iran, if it were to become a nuclear weapon state, it would definitely alter the balance of power in the region. It could further destabilize West Asia. It could become an existential threat for Iran's enemies like Israel and even the Sunni powers. And India has close relations with all of them. We had very close ties with Iran. We had very close ties with Israel, very close ties with Saudi Arabia and others. So India was essentially caught in between. Then President Obama brought a lot of pressure on India to follow the economic sanctions. From 2009 onwards, India was pressurized by the US to follow the economic sanctions against Iran. But then Prime Minister Manmohan Singh took a stand and refused and rejected the American sanctions. Because India follows an independent foreign policy built on the principle of strategic autonomy. We are not guided by the interests of other countries. We are guided by our own national interests. At that time, Iran was critical for us. Iran was the second largest oil supplier to India, very crucial for our energy security. We had invested in the hydrocarbon projects of Iran, in oil and gas projects in Iran. Iran was crucial to counter terrorism in Afghanistan and Pakistan. We had very close intelligence and counter-terrorism relations. India, Iran were collaborating on key projects like Chabahar Port Project, which was critical for connectivity with Afghanistan and Central Asia. So India rejected the sanctions, and we bypassed the American sanctions, continued the trade relations with Iran. We continued importing oil and created alternate payment arrangements to pay for the Iranian oil. We used alternate currencies. We used the Indian rupee itself by creating Vostro Nostro accounts to pay for Iranian oil. So that is how India evaded the American pressure, bypassed the American sanctions, and maintained our close strategic ties with Iran. But constantly we were being pressurized. We were being caught between US, Iran, Israel, and the Sunni powers. And we had to carry out a balancing act. So this nuclear deal was a big breathing space for India. The JCPOA, signed in 2015, ended these tensions, lifted the sanctions, making it easy for India to invest in Iran and to trade and engage with Iran. But however, Donald Trump, when he came to power during his first term, he dealt another major blow. In 2018, without any basis, without any proof, Donald Trump alleged that Iran was not following the terms of the deal. And he alleged that Iran was violating the nuclear deal. Even though IAEA certified that Iran was following the terms of the nuclear deal, it was not enriching uranium anymore. The other members of the agreement, like the European powers, Germany, France, UK, they all insisted that Iran was abiding by the deal. But Donald Trump broke from the deal and quit, and the US quit from the JCPOA, and Donald Trump brought even stricter sanctions against Iran. So since then, the tensions and rivalries have continued. And Donald Trump pressurized India, China, and other countries to zero out oil imports, to cut oil imports from Iran. This time, the Modi government fell under Trump's pressure, under American pressure, given the close US India relations, and we followed the American sanctions. We cut off oil trade from Iran, zeroed out the oil imports, and obviously, Iran was not happy with it. Iran downgraded its relations with India. It even dropped India from the Chabahar railway project as a retaliation. So that is how India has been caught between the rivalries and tensions of US and Iran over the nuclear program. That is why the topic is so relevant. So after Donald Trump, President Biden, who came in, tried to repair the damage. He tried restarting the nuclear talks in Vienna, where IAEA is headquartered. But those talks did not really progress well. Then came the deadly terror attack by Hamas against Israel in 2023, which triggered the Gaza war. And since then, Israel Iran have been locked in a conflict. So nuclear talks have completely fallen apart. But don't forget, in this ongoing war, Iran has been dealt a severe blow. Iran has lost its closest ally, Syria. Bashar al Assad's regime was toppled by Turkey backed extremist groups. And now Iran has lost a key ally. Hamas and Hezbollah, the two major proxies of Iran, have been decimated by Israel. The top leadership of Hamas and Hezbollah has been wiped out. In fact, Iran and Israel got into a direct confrontation on few occasions, and Iran has been clearly pushed onto the back foot. Israel has gained the upper hand in the ongoing conflict. So Israel senses that opportunity, that this is an opportunity to further push Iran back, maybe forever dismantle Iran's nuclear program, either through a deal or either through military operations. Now, with Trump back in power in the US, Netanyahu is confident, Israel is confident that it will have American backing for any military action against Iran. That is why Trump has issued a final warning. Now, don't take this lightly. This is a very serious warning that Trump has given. And as we know, Trump might even deliver without thinking about the consequences. We have seen how Trump deals with other matters. He happens to be more impulsive. And the same can be the case with Iran as well. He has warned that if the talks which have now begun, if they don't succeed, if there is no deal, and if Iran doesn't stop nuclear enrichment, there might be a possible conflict where Israel might directly attack Iran's nuclear facilities, leading to a much bigger and wider escalation, and the US might even join that war. Or US itself might lead those military operations with support from Israel. So that would be a deadly outcome for the region, which will significantly hurt India's interests. Because if the region is destabilized, our energy security will be threatened. Indian diaspora, which is present in large numbers in West Asia, will be under threat. So that is why understanding this topic is so important. Now, coming to the last big question: how close is Iran to building a bomb? Is Donald Trump right that Iran is about to build a nuclear bomb? The answer is yes. See, until 2018, Iran was strictly following the terms of the deal. Donald Trump was basically lying because every other country, including IAEA, certified that Iran was following the terms of the deal. But once Trump quit the deal and imposed strict sanctions on Iran, it started crippling Iranian economy. So Iran also retaliated. It broke from the commitments of the treaty and started enriching uranium again. Iran had actually stopped it for a few years because of the nuclear deal. But now that US was targeting Iran and Trump was specifically targeting Iran, Iran restarted the enrichment program. And today, according to experts, Iran is just weeks or maybe few months away from building a nuclear bomb if necessary. It has already acquired or procured few kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. Is that clear? It has close to 70 kilograms of 60% enriched uranium. From here, it will take hardly few weeks of effort to enrich this to maybe 90%, which is needed to make a bomb. Experts estimate that if Iran decides, they've not decided to build a bomb. If they decide, if the leadership approves the development of a bomb, Iran can have 90% enriched uranium within few weeks. Because 90% of the work is done by running the centrifuges for the last 20 plus years. Iran has procured enough highly enriched uranium to at least have enough weapons grade uranium to build at least 5 to 6 nuclear warheads. But when it comes to a nuclear bomb, it's not just the uranium, right? There are other components, other technologies involved. So Iran has been working on them in parallel, be it turning the gaseous highly enriched uranium into metallic form, assembling it into the bomb's core, be it the detonator and the explosives that are needed, the firing systems, the neutron initiators, the explosive lenses which are needed, along with ballistic missiles. You need launch vehicles and re-entry vehicles to deploy nuclear weapons. So this might take few more months if Iran decides, because Iran has parallelly worked on these technologies over the last 20, 30 years. So when it comes to building a nuclear bomb, there are basically two main priorities. One is to develop the fissile material, which is to enrich your uranium to weapons grade uranium, then turn it into a nuclear core. And on the other side, the related technologies which are needed, from ballistic missiles to detonators, explosives, etc. So Iran has parallelly worked on both of them. That's what any country would do. And let's say tomorrow Iran decides to build a bomb, a deployable nuclear bomb. It might need maximum few months to do it. In few weeks, they will enrich the 60% uranium to 90% weapons grade uranium. They'll take maybe another few months to ensure that all the other components are in place and assemble that into a warhead and deploy that into the battlefield. They can even easily assemble low yield nuclear weapons. They need not wait for highly enriched uranium. Even using the existing uranium, they can build low yield nuclear weapons, right? So Iran is just weeks or months away from building a nuclear bomb if it decides to do that. Please understand, Iran's leadership has not approved the building of a nuclear bomb, not officially. Understood? But if they decide, they are just weeks or months away from having a deployable nuclear warhead. So that is what worries the countries in the region. And now, US has offered one last chance, opened a dialogue with Iran, and Iran has reciprocated. Obviously, Iran doesn't want a confrontation now. It's already on the back foot. It has lost key allies in the region. So Iran also is looking to use the opportunity because Iran's economy has been crippled and destroyed by the sanctions. Iran has been struggling. So talks have begun in Oman, which is acting as a neutral location. In Muscat, the representatives of US and Iran have met. The US Special Envoy, Steve Witkoff, has met with the Iranian foreign minister, and reports indicate some positive progress. So, in the coming days, there will be further rounds of talks. Very soon, there might be a new nuclear deal. Another nuclear deal might be worked out to replace the JCPOA. So, if the deal is worked out, it might bring Iran's nuclear ambitions to an end, but it will bring stability to the region and to the world. But if the talks fail, the ramifications can be very serious. Let's say the talks fall apart and US and Iran are hostile to each other and they keep on targeting each other. As I said, within weeks and months, Iran can easily assemble and build few warheads, and Israel will try everything possible to prevent that from happening. Israel has openly said that it's going to launch military strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities, basically triggering a full fledged war. And the US also has threatened military action. Strategic experts have already noted that US has been making few attempts to prepare for such a possible conflict. Preparatory steps have been initiated at American military bases present in the region. So that is why these nuclear talks are so significant and it has direct impact for Indian interests. So please take up this practice question. Write your answers, post the answer in the comment section. Let's see how many of you can bring out a good answer. Now, we proceed towards the prelim section to take a quick look at 10 important articles which are present in today's newspaper. Let's start with this article on page 7. See, recently, kooky political and armed groups have issued a threat to the Methi groups. Few days ago, cookies have issued an order that Metis should not participate in a religious festival. They should not climb a very important hill, the Thangjing hill, that is located in the Churchandpur district. So let's understand what is the background here and where is this hill located? Why is it important for the Metis? See, Metis celebrate their new year, which is known as the Cheirao. So this can be an art and culture question. Metis, who are predominantly Hindus, there are few Metis Muslims as well, but predominantly Metis are Hindus today. So, based on their historical faith, which predates Hinduism, the Sanamahi faith, They mark their annual new year known as Cheirao. During this annual new year festival, the Metis have a ritual, they have a practice. What is this annual ritual? They basically take up a pilgrimage, the Cheirao Ching Kaba. That is the name of the pilgrimage. They trek a hill called the Thangjing Hill, located over here in Churchandpur district. Churchandpur is primarily dominated by the Kukis, which has been at the heart of the conflict between Metis and Kukis, and a buffer zone has been created here. Metis are not supposed to enter Kuki areas because don't forget, Kuki land is tribal land, protected as a tribal territory. Similarly, Kukis have been prohibited from entering the Metis dominated Imphal Valley as well. To maintain peace between the two sides, a buffer zone has been created by the government and the security forces. Now, this sacred hill, the Thangjing Hill, is located in Kuki territory in Churchandpur. And Metis have always accessed this hill during this annual pilgrimage called Cheirao Ching Kaba. This ritual helps them mark their new year, the Cheirao festival. So just like Hindus carry out a annual Hindu pilgrimage to, let's say, Mount Kailash or other sacred pilgrimage places, or how Muslims carry out a pilgrimage to Mecca. On similar lines, for Metis, this is a very sacred pilgrimage. Now, Kuki groups are issuing an order that Metis should not dare enter this hill. They should not climb and trek this hill because they would be breaching the buffer zone, which could result in further violence between the two sides. So that is the context in which this topic is in news, but please note down the name of the hill, where it is located, the name of the festival and the ritual, which can come as an art and culture question. Next, India, US have conducted the fourth edition of Tiger Triumph exercise. Tiger Triumph is the first tri-service exercise between India and US, which was started in 2019. See, India, US have many military exercises. We have an exercise between our armies. There is a separate exercise between our navies, a separate exercise with our air force, with special forces as well. Now, can you find out the names of all these exercises between India, US, and mention that in the comments? That's a small homework for you. In 2019, after we had signed the LEMOA agreement, Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Agreement, this agreement allows Indian and American forces to request logistical support from the other side if necessary. If at all they carry out a joint military operation, or if they need logistical assistance for refueling, resupplies, and servicing, they can request the other country to share their military bases and use the logistical support to widen the operations, the military operations of the other country. So, for example, US forces can access Indian military facilities and vice versa. So, following the LEMOA agreement, India US launched a new military exercise called Tiger Triumph, which is the first ever tri-service exercise between India US, meaning all three services, all the armed forces of both countries participate in it. The Army, Navy, Air Force together. And this time, when the fourth edition of Tiger Triumph was held, even the Space Force of US participated. The US has a dedicated space force, just like it has an Army, Navy, Air Force. It has a dedicated space force for space warfare. So this armed branch of the US also participated, and it focuses mainly on HADR operations, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief operations, which is critical in disaster management. So Indian and American forces can coordinate and work together during times of disasters to help the victims of a disaster. They can provide assistance to other countries. These operations will enhance interoperability. They can share their experiences, learn from each other, and essentially it can even help someday in joint operations if necessary. So please note down the name of this military exercise. It's a tri-service exercise. And we have such a tri-service exercise only with Russia other than the US. India, Russia had a tri-service exercise like this, where all three armed forces would participate together. And USA was the next country with which we started a tri-service exercise. Clear? So please make a note of this and find out the names of other military exercises between India and US and mention that in the comments. Next, another defense and science and tech related article. India is building an indigenous civilian transport plane called the Saras Mk2 or Mk2. Saras is a initiative of the NAL, National Aerospace Laboratories, which is part of the CSIR, Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. NAL has been developing the Saras transport plane for many years, but the project suffered a big setback few years ago when there was a deadly accident when the Indian Air Force pilots who were testing the plane, they all lost their lives. Finally, the project was revived again. Now, the new variant of Saras is being fully developed. By December 2027, it will be ready for its first trial. Its first test flight is expected to take place in December 2027. The HAL will be manufacturing the plane once the design is complete by NAL. And this could be used not just for civilian transport purposes, but even for military applications. Indian Air Force is expected to buy some of the Saras planes for transport, for military transport, and it can be used for civilian purposes, especially to link small towns and cities to enhance air connectivity, to improve air transport in the country, or to promote tourism to remote areas, or during times of disaster, right? Or it can even be used as an air ambulance to provide air ambulance services, or it can even step up chartered plane usage in the country. They can be used as chartered planes. So Saras is an indigenously developed civilian transport plane which can possibly be used for military purposes as well. Next, this topic I think is very, very important even for your upcoming prelims. Please make a note. The first ever global carbon tax on shipping has been worked out by the global countries. Under the International Maritime Organization, which is a specialized agency of the United Nations, a global treaty has been worked out to impose a carbon tax on the entire shipping industry. As you know, shipping industry is obviously a polluting industry. It contributes greenhouse gas emissions, which is responsible for global warming. So to disincentivize the emission of greenhouse gases and to encourage the shipping industry to move towards cleaner fuels, a global treaty has been worked out for the first time. And this is also the first time that a carbon tax is being levied on an entire industry. The entire shipping industry will fall under this, and India is one of the signatories. 63 countries have signed the treaty. Even China, Brazil, along with India, they've all signed this important treaty. But however, the oil producing countries have opposed it for obvious reasons. Russia, Venezuela, Saudi Arabia, and others, the major oil exporting nations. Because such a carbon tax will hit oil exporting countries, so they have opposed it. And developing and least developed countries have a criticism against the treaty. The least developing countries and other developing nations from Africa, then Latin America region and Asia, they were asking for this revenue which is generated through the carbon tax to be used for climate finance. They wanted the funds to be distributed amongst the least developed countries and developing nations so that they can use that for climate action efforts. But that provision has not been included. This fund which is collected, the revenue which comes out of it, it's estimated that by 2030, up to $40 billion could be raised through a carbon tax on shipping industry. This will be used by the respective countries to essentially decarbonize the shipping industry. They will channel the tax, the revenue, the funds back into the shipping industry to develop cleaner fuels and cleaner technology to bring down emissions from the shipping industry. Is that clear? And United States has not participated in the treaty. The US has stayed out of it. As you know, Donald Trump doesn't believe in climate change. He's a climate skeptic, right? Obviously, US has always pulled out of Paris Agreement as well in the past. The US has essentially taken a stand under Trump against climate action. So obviously, it has not participated in the treaty, but 63 countries have supported this, including India. So very soon, from 2028, we will witness a carbon tax being levied on the shipping industry. Depending on the extent of emissions and pollution they contribute, a carbon tax will be levied on the shipping industry. And this money will be channeled towards decarbonizing the shipping industry. So please understand why developing countries are criticizing the treaty. Least developed countries, small countries, developing nations are criticizing it because they are not providing these funds for climate finance. They're not channeling the funds for developing nations. Rather, it will be used by the respective country to decarbonize the shipping industry. Next, another interesting topic on page number 9. This is related to diabetes. See, we have heard about type 1 diabetes, which is often hereditary, type 2 diabetes, which is a result of lifestyle, right? We generally associate diabetes, especially type 2 diabetes, with morbid obesity, with consumption and intake of high calorific food, and obesity, which is linked with insulin resistance, leads to diabetes mellitus, which is a non-communicable lifestyle related disease, which can be quite deadly as well. Then we have heard of gestational diabetes, where pregnant women, right, report a fluctuation in their insulin glucose levels, leading to gestational diabetes, which can be carried to the infant as well. But there is a new type of diabetes which is finally getting recognition. It's called type 5 diabetes, also known as malnutrition-induced diabetes. See, generally we link or associate diabetes with obesity, excessive consumption of food and nutrition, right? But there is a opposite extreme end, which is also possible. Such cases of diabetes linked with poor nutrition, malnutrition causing diabetes, was first identified in Jamaica in 1955. That's why it was also called J type diabetes. J for Jamaica, where it was first discovered. WHO also recognized it initially in 1985. WHO also recognized that malnutrition can cause such diabetes. But later, due to the lack of scientific proof and evidence, WHO disbanded this designation in 1999. WHO did not recognize malnutrition induced diabetes post 1999. But many such cases came up in other countries, in India, in South Korea, as well as in Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Uganda, Rwanda. Across these countries, many such cases were reported where a malnutrition patient would report diabetes. So now it became clear that malnutrition is indeed linked with diabetes in certain cases. So, to further study this and develop new therapies, new diagnostic tools and diagnostic standards and guidelines, a task force has been set up. The International Diabetes Federation, which held its World Diabetes Congress in Bangkok, has established the first ever task force on type 5 diabetes or malnutrition induced diabetes. It's also known as lean diabetes. So please be prepared for this. There can be a prelims question on this. So this task force will now focus on the research. Finally, there will be a formal designation of type 5 diabetes. They will develop a set of guidelines as well. They'll identify the diagnostic threshold to classify lean diabetes. They will develop new lines of treatment, and they will also develop education modules to train healthcare professionals around the world to tackle malnutrition linked or malnutrition induced diabetes. Next, on page 10, we have a very interesting article on India's automobile industry. There are a few facts which I feel can be important for your prelims. That's why I chose this article. See, generally, others might exclude or ignore this article, but trust me, there is a very important fact here which can help you in your prelims exam. It is specific to the auto industry of India. See, the world's largest auto producers are China, followed by United States, and then Japan. These are the top three in the automobile industry. India comes at the fourth position. We are the fourth largest automobile industry in the world after China, US, and Japan. That is the important fact that you take away from this article. But however, India is still falling behind because our overall auto trade market accounts for just 3% of the global auto trade market. We do assemble automobiles, we do produce various components, various technologies, but still India has a lot of catching up to do. That's exactly what this official from Niti Aayog and the report that has been published by Niti Aayog points towards. Niti Aayog Vice Chairman Suman K. Berry has argued that India has great potential to contribute to global value chain, essentially the automobile supply chain, we need to address the drawbacks we have currently. For example, our automobile industry has some inefficiencies. With regard to logistics and supply chain, we have inefficiencies. We depend on import of key components, especially from China, South Korea, and Japan. We need to reduce the dependency. We also need to reduce the cost of the equipment. We need to bring down the material and equipment cost, which is very expensive because most of it is imported. So if India can do this and focus on domestic indigenous auto manufacturing, India has every opportunity to play a critical role in the global value chain or the supply chain of automobile industry. Is that clear? Next, another article related to geography and science and technology. A new study has established an unknown fact, a very interesting fact about precipitation, about rainfall. See, ISRO, along with the Japanese space agency, JAXA, they had a joint project known as the GS Map ISRO. This was a joint project of ISRO and JAXA, the Japanese space agency. By using satellite data on cloud formation and precipitation levels and the presence of aerosols in the atmosphere, they developed a map, a global satellite map of precipitation. To understand precipitation patterns, rainfall patterns, and trends, satellite data was used to develop this global satellite map, and it was a joint collaboration of ISRO and JAXA. This data from GS map has indicated that the peak rainfall in different parts of India either advances or gets delayed depending on aerosol concentration in the atmosphere. Depending on the aerosols present in the atmosphere, which is essentially fine particulate matter present in the atmosphere, because see, aerosols have a complex relationship with the climate and weather patterns. Aerosols can help in increasing cloud formation. They help in increasing the reflective capacity of a cloud, where they reflect more solar radiation. They also have the ability to alter precipitation, either to speed up precipitation or to reduce precipitation as well. Now, this has been established that in the Indo-Gangetic plain, where high levels of pollution is reported, peak rainfall during the precipitation season has advanced by 2 to 4 hours. Peak rain is being received much earlier than anticipated because of more aerosol concentration, more pollution present in the Indo-Gangetic plain. Whereas in western central parts of India, the opposite has been seen, where peak rainfall has been delayed by a couple of hours due to the slightly lower aerosol concentration. Now, this is what you need to understand, the role of aerosols in the weather processes. As I said, aerosols contribute to cloud formation because they act like a seed. The fine particulate matter, right, which is present, it actually helps in condensation. It acts like a nuclei around which the condensation can happen and actually helps in increasing cloud formation. And it also adds more reflective capacity. It can have a greater capacity to reflect the solar radiation which is coming in. That is the reason why aerosols are being considered as a solution under geoengineering. What is geoengineering? Geoengineering is an emerging, advanced field of science and technology that focuses on engineering the earth to tackle global warming. You might have heard of very ambitious ideas like placing mirrors in space to reflect incoming solar radiation. You might have heard of creating artificial carbon sinks to remove the excess greenhouse gases. Similarly, under geoengineering, there is a proposal to seed our atmosphere, spray more aerosols into the atmosphere to increase cloud cover, to block some of the sunlight and reflect some of the sunlight, and alter precipitation patterns by using aerosols in the atmosphere. So, aerosols do have a positive impact sometimes, but it can have a more negative impact as well. It's a very complex relationship that it shares with the process of condensation of clouds and precipitation of rainfall. So this is something you need to understand. It's a basic concept. So pollution sometimes can have a beneficial effect, but it might have other long-term consequences which we don't fully understand. That's why geoengineering methods are controversial as well. We don't fully understand how it exactly works, right? But geoengineering is a field of science which is coming out with such ambitious ideas to either deflect solar radiation or maybe even to absorb some of the greenhouse gases to control global warming. Next, the Caspian Sea is seeing a major retreat. The Caspian Sea is considered as the world's largest inland water body, one of the largest lakes, a endorheic lake that is surrounded by land on all sides. It is known for having highly saline water. The salinity levels are more because it's an endorheic lake. The fresh water inflow is very limited. And today, climate change is threatening the Caspian Sea. Since the freshwater flow is very limited, global warming is increasing the rate of evaporation and hence the water levels are dropping. Is that clear? So it is estimated that by the end of the century, Caspian Sea might lose several meters of water. Eventually, this could threaten the Caspian seals, which are an endangered species. Caspian seals could be threatened and driven towards extinction if water levels further drop in the Caspian Sea because of global warming. Now, please identify the countries present around the Caspian Sea: Russia, Azerbaijan, Iran, then Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan. Please make a note of this, can be very important for a map based question. And also think of the other consequence. If Caspian Sea were to dry out or if water levels were to drop, this can affect inland navigation and this will affect India. How? Let me know in the comments. You think about it. The drying of Caspian Sea, the falling water level in Caspian Sea, how can it affect India? I'm telling you it will affect India. So think about this. Tell me how it can affect India, why India should also be concerned about the dropping water levels in the Caspian Sea. Please mention that answer in the comment section. Next, another interesting development in Africa. On page 14, we have an article related to this African country called Gabon. See, Gabon is an African nation located over here in the western central part of Africa that faces the Atlantic Ocean. Gabon is very close to Gulf of Guinea. This is the strategic Gulf of Guinea, which is crucial for shipping. And Gabon is bound or surrounded by Cameroon, Equatorial Guinea, Republic of Congo. You need to be aware of the geography. See, Gabon saw a military coup in 2023. Many African countries, especially in western part of Africa and across the African Sahel region, they have seen repeated military coups in the last few years. UPSC has asked many questions on such military coups in Africa. If you have seen previous questions, right, you would know what I'm talking about. So Gabon saw such a coup attempt. For many decades, Gabon was ruled by a dynasty, the Bongo dynasty, which was accused of corruption and elitism. This dynasty was thrown out in 2023 in a coup by a leader known as Brice Oligui Nguema. Since then, Gabon was under dictatorial rule, ruled by the junta, or as you say in Spanish, the junta, the military junta. So now Gabon is preparing for its first election. It has held its first ever election since 2023 coup, and the military leader, the junta chief, is expected to win the election to become the elected leader of Gabon. So please know where the country is located and know about this political development because UPSC pays a lot of attention with regard to political instability in Africa. Coming to the last article for today, Israeli Defense Forces have gained control of the strategic Morag axis. This now allows the IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, to control three important corridors in Gaza Strip. Along with Morag axis, IDF controls the Philadelphi Corridor and as well as the Netzarim Corridor. So these locations, these places which are in news can be asked in a map-based prelims question. So let me show you the maps where these corridors are present, why they are important. Let's understand that. This is Israel, and I'm sure all of you identify Gaza Strip, the world's largest open-air prison, where Israel has blockaded millions of Palestinians, and Israel has been accused of committing large-scale atrocities in the ongoing war. So the border between Gaza and Egypt, present near the Rafah border crossing, this line that you see here, this is the Philadelphi Corridor. As per the Israel-Egypt peace agreement of 1979, signed under the Camp David Accords, Israel maintains military control at Philadelphi Corridor. Since Hamas and Palestinian militant groups have received funds and weapons from Egypt across the border through Rafah crossing, Israeli forces have maintained control of this corridor, which is called the Philadelphi Corridor. Then, over here in central Gaza, towards the northern parts of Gaza, you have another corridor called Netzarim Corridor, which is also controlled by Israel, controlled by the IDF. So, Netzarim Corridor separates northern Gaza from central Gaza. Israel has exercised military control across this corridor, blocking the movement of people. So, during the ongoing Gaza war, Israel has often issued evacuation orders asking Palestinian civilians to move away from the Netzarim corridor towards the southern parts of Gaza when initially it started the bombing campaign in northern Gaza. All right. Now, finally, the Morag axis or the Morag corridor, which is in news. Now, the IDF has gained full control of the Morag axis as well, which is present between the Philadelphi corridor and Khan Yunis. It is basically present between Rafah border crossing, which is nothing but the Philadelphi corridor. This entire stretch along the Egyptian border is the Philadelphi corridor. So to the north of it, you have a place, an Israeli settlement called Morag, which IDF forces have fully captured now, thereby gaining full military control in southern Gaza. Now, IDF forces have full control from Philadelphi corridor across the Rafah crossing all the way till Khan Yunis near Morag corridor or the Morag axis. So this strengthens Israeli hold over Gaza and it has raised more concerns for Palestinian civilians in the ongoing conflict. So these locations can be important for a map-based question. So this brings my discussion to an end. I hope the detailed analysis has been interesting and useful, and I hope you've learned something in today's class. If you did, do let us know through your likes and comments, share the video with other aspirants, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it. I'll see you tomorrow. Till then, take care. Have a good day.